In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Americans were enthralled by new technologies, from the dawn of electricity to the jet age, and bold social movements promising a better future. Visionaries believed that rapid innovation and fringe ideas could revolutionize how we live at home. This optimization gave rise to a series of futuristic house styles that were heralded as the next big thing. Each was a bold experiment reflecting its era's ideals, yet most proved impractical or fell out of favor despite the initial hype. Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit that subscribe button and let's uncover the futuristic houses that remained in the past. In the 1850s, an eccentric idea swept across America. Why live in a boring square house when you could have 8 sides? The Octagon House fad was sparked by Orson Squire Fowler's 1848 book, The Octagon House, A Home for All, which promised that 8-sided homes were more efficient, healthy, and harmonious with nature. Thousands of these geometric curiosities were built by the 1860s, typically 2-story homes with flat roofs, wraparound verandas, and a central cupola. Enthusiasts claimed the design allowed more sunlight and better airflow in every room. While forward-thinking for its time, the octagon craze was short-lived. Traditional builders found the shape awkward. Just imagine trying to fit square furniture into triangular corners. And construction was more complex than for traditional homes. By the 1870s, the Civil War and changing tastes dampened the enthusiasm, and by the early 1900s, octagon houses had fallen completely out of vogue. Today, only a few surviving octagon houses stand as quirky relics of a Victorian-era experiment that never became the new normal. Not content with inventing the light bulb, Thomas Edison dreamed of illuminating the housing industry with an unconventional idea: houses cast entirely of concrete. In 1908, Edison patented a system to pour an entire house in one single molding operation, walls, roof, bathtubs, and all, kind of like an early predecessor of 3D printing. He touted these monolithic concrete homes as fireproof, insect-proof, easy to clean, and ultra-cheap. Edison's vision was to mass-produce housing for the masses, offering a quick escape from the urban slums to solid, modern homes. However, reality didn't match the hype. Each house required an enormous 2,300-piece iron mold, and a builder would need to invest around $175,000 in equipment before pouring even one house. That's the modern-day equivalent of over $6 million in equipment. Despite Edison's enthusiasm, developers saw these gray, blocky houses as low-income slum replacement units, hardly desirable for the average family. Unsurprisingly, interest was sparse. Only a handful of Edison concrete houses were ever built in New Jersey and Indiana before the project fizzled. The Edison Portland Cement Company lost millions, and by 1917, the venture was deemed a massive failure. Edison's single-pour houses turned out to be too costly and unwieldy for builders, making this ahead-of-its-time idea a concrete example of failure, albeit one that prefigured modern 3D printed concrete homes. Lloyd Wright is celebrated as a genius who reshaped modern architecture, but living in one of his experimental homes could be a mixed blessing. Wright's houses, from his early 1900s prairie-style dwellings to mid-century masterpieces like Falling Water, were laboratories of innovation. He pioneered open floor plans, built-in furniture, and organic architecture that blended with nature. Yet these groundbreaking designs often came with very real functional problems. Wright notoriously favored flat roofs and avant-garde materials that leaked or deteriorated. In fact, Falling Water, built boldly over a waterfall, began leaking almost as soon as it was finished. Decades later, the iconic house required a multi-year, multi-million-dollar restoration to address persistent roof and window leaks. In the Lloyd Wright community, it's joked that you can measure a Wright house by how many buckets you need to catch the drips. Additionally, he was adamant that the builders follow his plans for massive concrete cantilevers to essentially not be reinforced. Thankfully, the contractor snuck in rebar, otherwise Falling Water would have fallen in the water by now. Other Wright homes had similar issues: structural sagging, mold problems, and high maintenance cost. Owners often found themselves in a love-hate relationship with these houses, enchanted by the beauty, but beleaguered by repairs. Despite the practical headaches, Wright's influence on home design is undeniable. His visionary ideas about space, light, and connection to the environment have outlasted the buildings themselves, proving that a great architect's design legacy can endure even if a ton of his buildings struggle to stand the test of time. Unveiled during the Great Depression at Chicago's 1933 Century of Progress World's Fair, the House of Tomorrow promised visitors a dazzling preview of future domestic life. Designed by architect George Fred Keck, This all-glass, cylindrical house was America's first glass house, predating even Philip Johnson's and Mies van der Rohe's famous glass homes. Fairgoers marveled at its floor-to-ceiling glass walls and radical amenities. It featured an open-plan interior, the very first General Electric dishwasher, an iceless electric refrigerator, and central air conditioning, marvels virtually unheard of in 1933. The House of Tomorrow even boasted an attached garage with a push-button electric door and an airplane hangar, anticipating an era where every family might own a personal plane. Millions toured this optimistic exhibit home, and the media dubbed it the home of the future, brimming with idealism. After the fair, the house was relocated to Beverly Shores, Indiana, along with a few other model homes. However, despite its inspiring vision, the House of Tomorrow did not spark a mass shift towards glass-walled, airplane-ready homes. In practice, it was too expensive and technologically advanced for most 1930s homebuyers. Over the ensuing decades, it was altered and eventually stood vacant after 1999, its restoration deemed too complex and costly for most to attempt. The House of Tomorrow remains a landmark of early American modernism, a prophecy that everyday homes would embrace cutting-edge tech, but ultimately, it was a one-off experiment that the housing market just wasn't ready to replicate in its time. In the 1940s, architect Buckminster Fuller set out to revolutionize housing with his Dymaxion house, an aluminum pod of the future that promised maximum functionality through dynamic design. Fuller's concept, first conceived in the 1920s and revisited after World War II, was essentially a lightweight, circular prefab house that could be mass-produced like cars and shipped anywhere. The Dymaxion house hung from a central mast with cable-supported walls, a system he would call tensegrity. It incorporated novel ideas like a rainwater cistern, a ventilation system inspired by aircraft, and a Dymaxion bathroom with a low water use fog shower and dehydrating toilet. In theory, it was ultra-efficient, and its round footprint could even rotate to follow the sun. In practice, however, Fuller's futuristic dwelling remained largely theoretical. By 1946, prototypes were produced, but Fuller, a perfectionist, never approved them for mass production. Only one hybridized prototype was ever actually lived in by an investor's family for a few decades. The project ultimately stalled due to Fuller's unwillingness to compromise, engineering hurdles, and the high cost of manufacturing in post-war years. Fuller cheerfully called himself the world's most successful failure, and indeed, the Dymaxion house failed as a product. After World War II, Americans faced a severe housing shortage, and the Lustron Corporation stepped forward with a gleaming futuristic solution: enameled steel prefab houses that could roll off an assembly line. Lustron homes were factory-made kit houses assembled from around 3,300 interlocking metal panels, essentially a steel house you could snap together on site like a three-dimensional puzzle. They came in modern ranch-style layouts, complete with built-in metal cabinets and even a combination clothes and dishwasher. These homes were marketed as ultra-durable and low-maintenance. The porcelain-coated steel walls never needed painting, you could clean them with a garden hose, and you could even hang pictures with magnets instead of nails. Backed by federal loans and touted as an affordable answer for young families, Lustron planned to produce 45,000 homes. So what went wrong? In short, almost everything outside the concept. From 1948 to 1950, Lustron managed to build only about 2,500 units before the company went bankrupt. The production line never hit its stride. The huge Columbus, Ohio factory couldn't meet output targets and delays mounted. Costs spiraled as steel prices rose, and traditional homebuilders and labor unions pushed back against the newfangled prefab approach. Banks were wary of financing steel houses with no track record, and some neighborhoods rejected Lustron's boxy, ultra-modern look as out of place. Buyers who did get a Lustron home often loved the easy upkeep, but some encountered moisture and condensation issues in all-metal walls. Ultimately, Lustron's ambitious promise collapsed under financial troubles and logistical woes. By the 1950s, the company folded, making Lustron one of the post-war era's most famous housing flops, with about 2,000 of its quirky steel bungalows all surviving today as reminders of a dream of mass-produced housing that rusted out early. In the atomic age mid-century, Googie Architecture burst onto the scene with unswept roofs, boomerang angles, and neon galore, looking like something straight out of the Jetsons. Named after a 1949 Los Angeles coffee shop called Googie's, this ultra-modern style was inspired by car culture, the space race, and atomic optimism. It thrived in flashy diners, motels, and gas stations, especially in Southern California, where eye-catching shapes lured motorists off the road. A few brave souls even tried translating Googie's futurism into homes. Architects like John Lautner designed space-age houses with dramatic cantilevered roofs and saucer-like forms. For example, Lautner's famous Chemosphere house looks like a flying saucer perched in the Hollywood Hills. While fun and forward-thinking, the style had its drawbacks for domestic life. Googie homes could appear gimmicky and were often expensive custom builds, not something the average 1950s family could afford or get approved by a loan officer. Many neighborhoods and critics at the time derided the styles as vulgar or goofy, dubbing it a triumph of styling over substance. By the mid-1960s, taste shifted. The space-age exuberance gave way to more subdued modernism. Today's surviving Googie buildings are cherished retro landmarks, but the vision of entire neighborhoods filled with Jetsons-like homes turned out to be a future that never arrived. In the 1960s and 1970s, counterculture idealism met architectural innovation in the form of geodesic dome homes, Buckminster Fuller's next bold experiment following the failure of Dymaxion Houses. The geodesic dome, a lattice of interlocking triangles forming a curved dome, was lauded as the efficient housing shape. It enclosed a large area with minimal materials and could even be DIY assembled from kits. Dome homes promised superior energy efficiency. Their spherical shape enclosed more volume for less surface area, helping reduce heating cost. Enthusiasts claimed dome living felt liberating, with soaring interior spaces free of right-angle constraints. During the 1960s, dome houses popped up in communes, eco-villages, and even suburban experiments, as people imagined the traditional American home might soon be replaced by these moon-base-like structures. However, the dome dream ran into practical realities. Builders discovered that fitting kitchens, bathrooms, and furniture into a curved shell was challenging, as most building materials and furnishings are made for straight walls. Construction was tricky too, often requiring custom parts and cutting hundreds of triangular panels. Worst of all, many dome homes turned out to be leaky. The numerous joints between panels were prone to water intrusion, so a rainstorm could send water trickling inside. Maintenance was a headache, and homeowners' insurance could be hard to get for such experimental structures. By the end of the 1970s, the brief dome home boom had largely fizzled out. Geodesic domes remain an iconic symbol of the future that never was, admired for their clever design, but ultimately a rarity in residential neighborhoods. Looking like flying saucers perched on the ground, Futuro houses were a space-age fantasy come to life in the late 1960s. Originally designed by Finnish architect Matti Saarinen in 1968 as a portable ski cabin, the Futuro was an elliptical prefab house made of fiberglass reinforced plastic about 26 feet in diameter, often mounted on little pod legs. Its oval door resembled an aircraft hatch, and the windows were portholes, giving it the undeniable appearance of a UFO that had landed in your neighborhood. The interior was compact and groovy, built-in couches, a central fireplace, and mod furniture. This house of tomorrow could be transported by helicopter or truck and plopped down on almost any terrain. For a brief moment, it seemed the future of housing might truly be extraterrestrial. However, the Futuro's commercial lifespan was about as short as a shooting star. Fewer than 100 of these homes were ever produced. Many jurisdictions refused building permits for what looked like a giant flying saucer on the lawn. Safety codes were also an issue. The single narrow entry door didn't satisfy the egress regulations in some areas, making the design dangerous. And then the 1973 oil crisis hit, sending petroleum-based plastic prices sky high. Suddenly, making fiberglass houses became far more expensive, erasing the cost advantage. By the mid-1970s, Futuro was effectively dead in the water as a product, regarded as a flashy failure. The remaining units were sold off, with some becoming roadside attractions, vacation cabins, or collector's items in the decades since. Today, about 60 survive around the world. In the 1970s, some architects took organic design quite literally, creating homes that look like giant mushrooms or other freeform sculptures, often using polyurethane foam. One famous example is the Mushroom House in New York, designed by architect James H. Johnson in 1970. This residence consists of multiple pods perched on stem-like columns, resembling a cluster of fungus sprouting from the forest floor. The pods were formed using a mix of concrete and sprayed polyurethane foam, allowing curved, otherworldly shapes that traditional wood framing couldn't easily produce. Futuristic foam houses like this were part of a broader 1970s experimental trend. Architects and DIY builders inflated big balloon forms and then sprayed them with foam or concrete to create domes and blob-like dwellings. Proponents claimed that sprayed foam construction was quick, cost-effective, and provided excellent insulation. Some even envisioned entire neighborhoods of whimsical, energy-efficient foam domes. Yet polyurethane houses never became more than odd one-offs and roadside attractions. The aesthetic was simply too unconventional for most homebuyers. The mushroom house looks fantastical, but not everyone wants to live in a storybook fungus. Practical issues also arose. UV light degrades foam over time, so exteriors needed protective coatings, otherwise the structure would literally start to disintegrate. Fire safety was also a concern, as early foam formulations could be highly flammable and emit toxic smoke. Additionally, banks and insurers were skittish about these unconventional buildings, making financing difficult. Ultimately, while a few foam houses briefly captured public imagination, the idea of spraying yourself a dream house proved too problematic. These houses remain as individual art pieces rather than a widely adopted style, a funky footnote in the history of futuristic design that, much like real mushrooms, popped up suddenly and just as quickly decayed from the mainstream scene. From eight-sided Victorians to flying saucer dwellings, each of these experimental house styles carried the hopes of its era. Hopes for healthier living, affordable homes, or space-age convenience. In the end, most of them failed to reshape American housing in the way their creators intended. Construction challenges, cost overruns, technical flaws like leaky roofs or poor materials, and plain old public skepticism grounded these flights of fantasy. Yet these failed homes are far from worthless. They often introduced innovations, from prefab techniques to open-plan interiors, that influenced later designs, and they continue to fascinate us as bold, playful reminders of bygone visions of the future. While the structures themselves may not have lasted or spread, the spirit of creativity and optimism they embodied lives on, proving that even failure can be a foundation for future innovation. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. Which of these styles is your favorite, or maybe your least favorite? Let me know down below in the comments section. My goal for this year is to reach 1 million subscribers, so if you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button and let's reach this goal together. As always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time on This House.